So today we're going to be talking about pruning houseplants. So of course there's tons of different reasons and tons of different options or decisions that might be made when it comes to pruning houseplants. And so many people are collecting indoor plants these days, and it's so popular and it's so trendy, and we couldn't be more excited to help support that trend. We love indoor plants. The list of plants is just gigantic, from philodendrons to sansevieria to aglaonemia. I mean, the list goes on, and I don't know all of them, and that's what I love about gardening is I'll never know all of them, but I do know the basics about pruning, and that's kind of what I want to talk to you today about. Some of the reasons that we might be pruning, some of the things that come up as we have our houseplant babies maybe struggling and we need to help them out a little bit. Pruning can help. There's a lot of different reasons to prune our indoor plants. And so we definitely want to go through some of those ideas. I've got a lot of plants here, so I've got a lot of demonstrations that I'm going to be able to do for you today. So that's what's really exciting is I think when pruning when somebody's teaching me about pruning, I like to see it. I like to try and understand it. And so while we're not face-to-face, and we can definitely be face-to-face, come and join us, come and see us, bring in your plants, we can help you out. But this, I hope, gives you a very, very good visual of how you can actually prune some of your plants. So I've got some great options here and a lot of different ways to show you how to prune some of these plants. The first thing that I always talk about when we talk about pruning is timing. When are we going to actually be pruning our indoor plants? Well, it's very similar to our outdoor plants, which, of course, vary greatly, especially when you get to blooming plants outdoors. We can talk about that. I've done pruning webinars. If you want to go back and look at some of those webinars, that's a huge subject as well. But for general purposes, pruning for your house plants, for your indoor plants, is typically going to be late February into all of March, really, even into mid-April. So really what I like to say is late winter into early spring, because that encompasses everybody. So as you're kind of exiting winter and going into spring, then it's a great time to consider pruning. Now, what I'm specifically talking about there is, if you're doing any kind of major cutting, if we're cutting vines back, if we're taking branches off, if we're maintaining size, if we're shaping, if we're doing anything kind of aggressive or major, then you want to do it in the late winter to early spring. And that's because that's when indoor plants are going to start to grow. So a lot of people think indoor plants grow year-round, which they pretty much will, and they can. It depends on your area. If you've got a sunroom that stays nice and warm, you might get year-round growth if you've got good humidity. But typically the sunlight in the area does control your indoor plants as well. So while our sun gets lower in the wintertime, that means less daylight, less amount of daylight, less hours of daylight. And therefore your plants aren't going to grow as fast during that winter time frame. So most plants start to recognize that and they'll shut down. And then as the sun gets higher and we start to get longer, warmer days, then our indoor temperatures warm up a little bit, plants know it's spring, and that's when they start to grow. And why do we want to prune in late winter to early spring? Is because if we prune a bunch off, we need to know that there's going to be growth to support that plant coming very quickly. So if we prune in fall going into winter, then you've pruned off some of its growth, and most of your indoor plants, I would say almost all of them, are going to be somewhat tropical, right? And they're going to have leaves throughout the entire winter season. And so if a plant has leaves in the winter, then it needs them to survive. It needs them to produce food for its root system. And so it's important to keep a majority of those leaves on. So we don't want to do an aggressive prune as we go into a dormant period. So timing is important. Now, in saying that, then I will also say that you might do pruning, small pruning, tip pruning, cleaning pruning, all of those different types of things that we're going to go over here in just a minute. You might do all of those, throughout the year. So some plants, you've probably had and probably need lots of care. Need lots of little picking and nitpicking and taking of leaves off and cleaning up a little bit. So you've got those, of course, and those are perfectly fine. Doing light pruning throughout the year is perfectly fine. I just don't want you to do a major kind of aggressive or significant pruning right before we go into the winter season. I'd rather you do that in the late winter, early spring, because the plant can regrow from that and regenerate new leaves. So timing, very important. We've got that off of our list. Now, the next thing we're going to need, of course, is tools. So we need some tools to be able to accomplish this job. And of course, the number one tool is a pair of pruners. I think any gardener would know that a bypass pair of pruners, which I'll show you here in a second, is one of the best tools that we always have in our shed, in our pocket, somewhere handy, because if you're gardening, you're almost always going to need pruners at some point. So if you're just a strictly indoor gardener, if you just do nothing but indoor plants, you still need pruners. All plants are going to need to be pruned. And while scissors will help, and I'll actually use some scissors today because I would call those a shear or a gardening shear, but pruners, bypass pruners, are almost going to accomplish almost every job that you need for an indoor plant. But there's some other tools. So let me go through some of those things. First and foremost, I always like to have a handy pair of gloves. Having gloves laying around is a good option. Some of us might be allergic to some of the saps and some of the different things that some of these plants have. Plus, sometimes it can be messy. In fact, I'm going to be doing a little bit of a messier job here at the end when I do a little bit of a major revive. But having a pair of gloves handy is very important. Keeps your hands clean, of course. Protects you if you happen to have a adverse effect to maybe some of the sap or some of the plants, to some of the touch of it. And it's a kind of a safety feature. If you're dealing with soil, if you got an open wound, if you accidentally almost nick yourself with the pruners, it does protect you a little bit. I'm not going to say it's not going to keep your finger on, so be careful when we're pruning, but if you're getting close, it's a good option to have a pair of gloves handy when we're doing this. And of course, the pruners. So I'm going to show you my old pair of Felcos because these I've had for a long time. You do not have to get Felco pruners. So this is a pair of Felco pruners. We do sell them. These are the classic F2s. Pruners are super, super important, but I wanted to show you a bypass pruner. So bypass pruners, I know, don't look at how lovely these look. They're a little dirty and nasty, but I love these guys and they're super, super easy. But bypass pruners are different than an anvil pruner. So anvil pruners are kind of a thing of the past. I wish I could even show you a pair. I don't even own a pair. I don't sell a pair. I don't know anybody that really does. I think some florists maybe use them some, but anvil pruners basically have an anvil, a flat surface, and the blade goes directly into it. And so you have a major smash point. So whenever you're cutting a stem, especially a living stem, you want to have a nice clean cut. And so having a nice pair of sharp pruners is really important for that. And an anvil pruner is going to smash, while a bypass pruner is just like a pair of scissors. You can see it right there, it just bypasses itself. So you can see that. Now you will have a small crush point. I usually say an anvil pruner, you're crushing about half of the stem typically, whereas a bypass pruner, you're about an eighth. It's a very small portion because this is not very sharp. So I can run my finger over this portion. It's a little sharp, but it's not very sharp. This is the sharp blade. So we want to be careful about that one. But you'll get a little crush zone, but not nearly as bad as an anvil pruner. So it's important to know that. And sometimes you can get double-sided things, where if you feel like you really got to get a clean cut, then you might go with a pair of gardening shears. These are awesome. These are by Bergen & Ball. These are a garden shear, so these are specifically designed for gardening, but they're basically a pair of scissors, a household pair of scissors. You might have one, with your knives and your butcher block, but basically a nice pair of scissors is very, very important, and these are going to be sharp on both sides, which is really nice if you're pruning some light things, maybe some ferns, or you're maybe even doing some leaf work. I'll show you that in a little bit. So having a pair of gardening shears is a really nice thing to kind of have on hand. So we got bypass pruners, we've got shears. You might want some specific tools too, like some bonsai shears. Now I brought these in because really what I like about these is you don't have to be bonsaiing with them. It's really nice to have this long kind of point here that will get nice and into the interior of a plant sometimes. And you've got this needle point kind of point to it, which makes it really easy to kind of get deep inside the plant if you need to, especially when I think of like a fern or a peace lily where you've got all these shoots coming up and you need to get in there. This is a great option. So a bonsai pair of pruners is nice even if you don't bonsai, because they might come in handy. And there's lots of different types and styles out there. Another one that I love is from Bergen & Ball. These are houseplant shears. So these I actually love to take out because I love to show people why they're different. Because you might say, a houseplant shear, that's just got to be the same as a regular pair of pruners. It's a bypass pruner. Doesn't look super, super different, right? However, what's really cool about this is these curved blades. And what that does is allows you to go in. So imagine this being a plant here. Go in, separate it, and you're not going to hurt any branches because you don't have any sharp blades or anything. Now, a needle nose point would also kind of accomplish the same thing, but these are nice and gentle turning, and they're designed specifically for indoor plants for pruning, and they're nice and sharp, and Bergen & Ball makes some really nice tools. So I always love having some houseplant pruners. I might use these, so I'm going to keep these out. If you're like a lot of us, including myself, I have a ton of pairs of bypass pruners. You might go get a cheap pair of bypass pruners. I love these guys. These are Terra Verde splash pruners. They're really inexpensive, and the nice thing about them is they come with these bright colored handles, because sometimes I'll go outside or I'll take a indoor plant out to prune and kind of clean it up, and I'll accidentally leave these outside. So if you're kind of like me, whereas I try and really be careful with my Felcos, I always try and keep these kind of nice and handy. And keep them in my pocket. But if you got a pair of kind of older pruners, they're always nice to kind of have around, because if you happen to leave them outside, one, the bright color handle will help you see them, but also if you lose them, you didn't invest a whole lot of money. So if you're not super good with your tools, you might consider a less expensive pair. We've got a lot of specific tools. I mean, I love these guys. I'm not going to take it out of the package, but this is a terrarium scissor. So basically, this is a curved needle point. Well, let's see. There we go. So you can see. It does come out nice and easy. So these are really nice. So if we're working with terrariums, they've got that curve on them. But this also could be used for a lot of different things. I mean, maybe we're lightly shearing a moss. You know, we've got a moss in a container, and we just want to kind of clip off the top and just kind of shear it back a little bit. Maybe a small grass. Lots and lots of different things to use. But this is just another option. Lots and lots of different tools. And of course, we've got our smaller dram pruners. These come in lots of different shapes and colors, which are really nice because they're great for small hands. So if you've got small hands, these are really easy because they're not huge and clunky, and they're easy to kind of close. So another good one there. A couple other things that you might want to have handy when we're doing this job, because I see Adele just said okay to prune and fertilize in the same day. Yes, in some instances, and I'm going to show you that practice here in a minute. So one of the other things that you might want to have handy is some fertilizer. Green leaf is a great option. This is what we use on almost all of our indoor plants. Got to be a little bit careful about some plants, and we can get into like liquids and stuff like that. There's a lot of different options, but I almost always resort to green leaf. You just got to make sure you put in the right amount. I always have some Super Thrive around in case I need to treat it with some Super Thrive. Super Thrive is a great hormone or vitamin solution, I guess is what I would say. That really kind of protects the plant and kind of takes some shock off the plant. So this might come in handy if we're doing something a little bit more significant. I'll get into all the details here in a minute. You might want to have some insecticides like systemic insect granulars or our indoor-outdoor spray. These are granular. You put it around the plant, gets absorbed by the plant, protects the plant. This is an aerosol, which is nice to get in some of those nooks and crannies if you've got something that might have some mealy bugs or some aphids that are boring in there. Of course, I always love to have triple action around. This is neem oil and pyrethrin, so it's very safe. It's a great option. And there's a ton of different ones, of course. Neem oil, we love neem oil. Neem oil is very easy to use and great. And then spinosad soap, which is awesome. Spinosad is a great one because this one's got the insecticidal soap plus spinosad, and spinosad is a great insecticide, especially for our indoor plants, completely natural, completely organic. Might also want to have some biotone around. Love my biotone, so if we're doing any kind of repotting, if we can get this right to the root system, you're going to be really successful with it. And if you're just doing a regular fertilize, my green leaf, and then, of course, some rooting powder. This might come in handy. So I always have a little jar of this laying around just in case I need it, in case I make a cut and maybe I'm like, ooh, I want to replant that because I know it roots really easily and I want to do that. Not a propagation expert, never claimed to be one, but it's good to have one of these guys laying around. And then I've got a little mixture here of some bleach and water. And I'll explain to you why I do this now, because we're about to get started on actually pruning. So 10 parts water, 1 part bleach. Very simple mixture, and I use that as a disinfectant for my pruners. So as I showed you my pruners, you're probably like, woo, those look pretty rough. But I do disinfect them, which is very important. If we're working on a plant that might have a disease, a bacterial issue, something along those lines, and we don't recognize it, and we've pruned it, and then we go and we prune another plant, then we're gonna transfer that issue. And so I always like to treat my pruners with a disinfectant. Now, it could be lots of different things. I like my 10-to-1 bleach to water ratio. A lot of people use mouthwash. Some people actually put it in a cup, and then you can just dip your pruners right in there. So if you're doing a lot of pruning, that's a great option. And then when I get done, I will usually get some WD-40, clean my pruners off really good, make sure they're nice and clean so that we're not going to rust out our pruners. And as you can see, these pruners have been through a lot. Let's see, I think they're probably about 15 or 16 years old. So these guys are pretty old and they're awesome. Still cut like a dream. And that's what I'll be using a majority of the time. So I've got all my materials, I've got my tools, I've got my insecticides, my water, all of the things I might be needing. So now we can start pruning. So one of the number one reasons that I always like to prune, or that I think all recognize that why do we need to prune, is pruning for health. So health is important. The overall vigor of a plant, the well-being of the plant is healthy leaves and green and nice and fresh looking. And so sometimes we have yellowing leaves for numerous different reasons, some unexplainable, right? So this plant's been growing great. All of a sudden, maybe there was a drought, or I missed a watering, or I'm low in fertility, or there's a lot of different reasons. It's a great sign of, hey, we need to do something, but the number one thing to do is take those leaves off. So do a little bit of cleaning on it. And that's what we are always doing here at the garden centers. We're going through making sure our plants are clean, because cleaning your plant is going to keep them nice and healthy. So I mentioned I've got demonstrations here. I will tell you, it was hard for me to go around and find any plants that had any bad leaves. Our employees here do such an amazing job with keeping the plants clean and healthy looking, but I was able to find one that actually had yellowing leaves. So, this is a Swiss cheese philodendron, or split leaf philodendron. There's lots of different types. Let me make sure. Yep, Swiss cheese. This one's staked up, so it's growing on this nice little arbor right here. But you can see some of these leaves don't look as healthy as other ones. Now, this is why cleaning is so important, is because this plant is taking a lot of energy and a lot of its power to try and keep these leaves going. So it's putting all its energy into this leaf here, while it should be putting it into the rest of the leaves and into new leaves. That's what we want. We want it to grow, we want it to be vigorous. Well, taking these leaves off is gonna help. Naturally, these will fall off, but it's gonna take time. And so instead of waiting for that to happen naturally and all of that energy going into that, and a lot of people might say it just needs to be fed, and that might be the case, but even if I feed it, it's going to still put its energy into these bad leaves, so we need to take them off. Now again, we can do this in a lot of different ways, a lot of different tools. I actually like to pinch some, so try a couple different methods. I'm going to talk about this as we go on. Every plant is different. Even in the same species, the same variety, you might find differences. A lot of times I will go through and just pick these off. So you can actually see right here where that stem, that yellow stem, meets that green stem there. So I will show you one method, and that's just to pick it off. Super, super easy, right? Well, sometimes they might not pick off as easily. Let's say I've got one. Let me see if I can find another one in here. This one looks like it's heading south, so it's not going to make it probably. It's, doesn't look as healthy. Is that the right one? No, here it is. Sorry. So this one right here, you can see it's starting to fade already. So it's got some splotching on it. You can see it right down here. So it's starting to splotch a little bit. And while I will show you this in a minute, that you can actually cut leaves, we don't highly recommend it, but we'll talk about it here in a second when I do another plant. But this is a great way of kind of getting ahead of the game, being preventative rather than curative. I always say that, one of my favorite things. So if you're not sure if this leaf will just pick right off, and this one's a little bit of a healthier stem, then let's see if I can pull it back here a little bit so you can see what I'm doing. Then you can take your pruners and just go in, and because it's just a leaf, we're not cutting the whole stem. I'm just going to cut it really close on an angle so you can see that angle cut that I made there. Let's see if we can get it focused on that. See that nice angle that I've got? And what that does is it's going to leave a little piece of that leaf still on there. Now what's going to happen over time is it's going to brown and it's going to naturally fall off, or you can go in and pick them off later. Now, majority of these you can just go through and probably pick off. Some of them might just fall off as you're going through it. So you can kind of just go through your plant, find the bad leaves, and it depends on the plant, of course, as to whether or not you can do this. So let me just go through and see if I can find a couple more. There's another one. And then another one down here. And there we go. So now I've got a majority of them. Looks much better already, right? I've got maybe one more in here that doesn't look really great. So there we go. I took off about 10 leaves, and it's going to be much, much better for it. I've got a couple in here that, probably could go. I don't know how aggressive I want to be with it. I see one on the screen here. There we go. So that one needs to come off because that one is definitely fading out. And by taking all of those bad leaves off, now I'm going to give it a lot more energy to be able to put into new leaves and to be able to put into its healthy leaves. Now, somebody asked earlier, I think it was Adele asked, fertilizing. This is a great option to go ahead and feed. So all I would have to do here is just say, okay, why is this happening? Well, it could have been a lot of different things. So, whenever you look at a leaf and you say, what is happening to my plant? Could have been a lot of different things. Could have been, we just got this plant in. There's an acclimation period. Every plant's gonna go through it. When you get a new plant into a new area, you're gonna have a period of when it's gonna acclimate and when it's going to kind of get used to its new home. Especially when you go from a greenhouse into a home setting. You're gonna have an acclimation period. Could be that. Could be low fertility, so it could be a little bit of a nitrogen or iron deficiency. That's why I love my green leaf, because it's got iron and boron and zinc and magnesium and all those great things in there. So I love that fertilizer for that plant food for that. Could be too much light, could be too little light, could be too much water, could be too little water. So of course I always can look at my moisture meter, light meter, and pH meter. These are great little handy tools to have around. So if you're wondering what's going on with your plant and you're not quite sure, picking up one of these will help. And of course, asking your experts here at the Garden Center what might be the case. Before you come in, always have some pictures, maybe bring in some leaves. If you have to, you can bring in the plant. If it's easily movable, we can help look at the plant. But also kind of know your sunlight. Know what kind of position you're in. Are you more into the interior of a room? Are you more towards the window? What kind of window is it? Is it facing east, west, south, north? All of those types of things. So spend a day before you just jump right up and come in to kind of diagnose everything, kind of get a lot of facts together. So when we ask you those questions, because those are going to be how we're going to determine your answer, you have all that information for us. So I think that always helps to kind of know what we might ask. So I will take this. I've got my green leaf here. And 3-gallon plant. Let's look at my chart here. We've got a 10-inch, so that's about what this is, about an 8 to 10 inch, so I'm going to go slightly less than 2 tablespoons. I've got my little handy scoop here. It's got 2 lines in it. Let me make sure I read it right. The big one is 1 tablespoon, the small one is a teaspoon, and it said 2 tablespoons. So that would be 2 full ones. I'm going to go just a little less than that and just give it a little bit of feed. And I'm just going to sprinkle it right around, and then this will naturally get watered in over time. And then I'll get another little scoop. We'll sprinkle that around. Try to avoid getting it on the leaves. We don't need to get it on the leaves. It can burn holes in it. And we do have organic formulations of this as well. So you can always be safe with that. If you've got indoor pets or cats or anything like that, be careful with your organics, because most of them are almost all made of chicken litter, turkey litter, something like that. So if you've got dogs and cats, they might like to sniff around and get in there. You can always treat them with your plant food, and then you can water it outside, bring it back in, especially as we get warmer days. If you're doing this in the right time frame, which is late winter to early spring, you might get a warm day that you can take it outside, feed it with organic plant food, water it nice and good, and then you can bring it back in. A lot of people will put some stuff over the top, like maybe some Spanish moss or different kind of decorative stones, which will also keep the animals out. Or you can just use a traditional formula, which is completely safe. Or liquid feeds. We've got lots of those. Tons of options of plant food. I'm not going to get into that because this is about pruning, not about feeding. We can do a whole nother webinar on feeding. All right, so that's one option there for pruning for health. Here's another great one. This is a Sansevieria, of course, very, very common plant, snake plant, and this will allow me to show you a couple different things as well. So let me get some of my leaves out of here. Put them in the trash. All right, so Sansevieria is very popular. These leaves last a long time. They're fairly slow growing, but they can grow in almost any condition. One of my favorite plants, super, super easy to grow. Snake plant, mother-in-law's tongue, Sansevieria. They got lots and lots of different names. But this one's got a couple different examples that I was able to show you, kind of different pruning techniques. One, you've got, I just showed you the Swiss cheese philodendron, so it's a vine. Vines are fairly easy. I'm going to show you another example of how to prune vines here in a little bit. But something like this, where you just typically get leaves coming from the bottom, is how do I prune this? So let's first start with the tips. So whenever you get this, again, numerous causes for what might cause this, but there's a couple different options. You can take the entire leaf off if you want to. It is putting energy into this. It seems pretty healthy. This has actually gone almost clear all the way through. It almost looks like paper at the top. So it's really not putting a ton of energy into that because it's dead, but it's unsightly. So you got a couple different options there. I can pull out my handy garden shears. This is where I love scissors, a nice pair of sharp scissors, because it's super, super easy to use. So before I go to town, I'm gonna spray it with my bleach mixture, make sure that's good to go. Brand new, so I don't think there's any issues, but better safe than sorry. So what I'll do here is I can prune just below that. Let me see if I can turn it so you can see what I'm doing here. So I'm gonna prune just below it. Now, nice and clean, looks great, no issues, right? You don't have to do that. In fact, a lot of people don't recommend doing it. You don't have to do it. A lot of those little tips that you see, you probably wouldn't even recognize unless you were looking very, very hard. But if it was a significant enough one like I just had, then it's not going to hurt it. Now, what's going to happen is this is going to scab. So it's going to, just like if anybody got cut here, right? So if we get cut, we're going to get a scab. So this is going to get a little bit of a mark on it. So it's not ever going to be as perfect as it is the day you cut it. It's always going to scab and heal up a little bit. It's going to be perfectly fine. It's not going to hurt the plant, but it's not necessary. It's not natural. You don't have to do it, but you can do it. So I'll do one more here. Let's see. This is a very, very small example. So little tiny brown tip there. I can just do a nice little cut. And I do like to typically cut those on a little bit of an angle. It looks a little bit more natural. It is going to give it a little bit of a larger scar area. So just realize that. You can see here, this one was not cut, but it looks like it was maybe pulled. So a lot of times that happens in shipping or just and naturally can happen. But this maybe had a dead tip and it naturally fell off. But you can kind of see that little bit of that brown edge. So it doesn't look bad. This is a perfectly fine technique. Now, here's a great example. This is why I grabbed this plant, because look at this leaf. So this one, you can see it's got, I don't know if that's a bacterial leaf spot or if it's just from water damage, or could have been 100 different things, right? You never really know. It's a sansevieria. It's not really going to be super hurt by it. It's also an older stem. I always look at that too. This one's definitely on the outside. It's seen better days. It's got lots of markings throughout it. So probably time for this leaf to go. I wouldn't go in and cut just that section out, because that's going to be unsightly. It's actually going to weaken it. It's towards the base. So this one just needs to come. Now, a lot of people will go in with a pair of pruners and just prune it down towards the base. What I always like to do with sansevieria specifically is I like to try and go in and give it a little pull. So I know you're not going to quite be able to see this, but I'm going down into the pot here. And if it doesn't come, I'm not going to hurt the plant. But I'm just going to give it a little wiggle. I'm going to put my finger down in there and just give it a little tug and see if I can get it to just kind of pop off the base. Because sansevieria are coming off of not a bulb, but basically a tuber, a giant tuber, and it's going to keep sending things out of the center, and it's going to have one down on the bottom. So you can always pull them off the edge. Think of like a Dracaena, very similar to that. I grabbed a little Dracaena here. I can kind of show you an example of that. So, you might see this has a center leader, it has a specific shoot, but you can go in and just kind of pull these branches off at the bottom if they're starting to fade on you. Similar idea with a sansevieria, it's just going to be down in the pot. And so you're not always going to be able to get to it, but here would be a great example of, if I can do it, I'm going to try. Because I know it'll be a little bit better for it. So there we go. I'm putting my hand down in there, seeing if I can get my thumb to just kind of separate it. I'm being gentle. Being strong but gentle. So there we go. We can hear it kind of going. And I am going to need to do a little prune on it, but that's okay. Perfectly fine. So there we go. Took out the whole leaf. Now, here's a great example. Is down in here, I found one that had been pruned. And now that it's been pruned for a while, look, I can take it out and pull it out, and then I can relieve it of that as well. So just trying to keep my plant clean. So even though I wasn't able to get in there and really get that completely out, I was able to find an old one. Let's see, I've got another one down here that was pruned more recently. So let me show you this one. So you can see this one was pruned off down here a little bit more recently, and that one might not be ready to be pulled off. Yep, there we go. So there you go. That's how you can take out the leaf nice and smooth and nice and clean. And that way it doesn't see, as you can see, this one was pruned. It's still green. It's still going to put energy in there. Now I've completely taken that option away from it, and now it can put all of its energy into the rest of the plant. So another great option to prune. And that one I would probably go ahead and put a little bit of a light plant food on as well. Now let me show you another one. This guy has a lot more damage to it. So let's see if I might try and get it risen up just a little bit more so you can see it here. So you can see a lot more damage on it. So I'm going to do a really quick kind of overall prune on this. Let me get because again, never know if my Sansevieria had an issue or my philodendron, but here we go. I'm just going to put the bleach on there. Make sure that's good, because I am going to do a little bit more of an aggressive prune here because I want to take a lot of these leaves off. So, you know, maybe you went away on vacation and your friend didn't maybe do as good of a job as you thought on watering your plant. So we've got a plant that's struggling, and we're going to go and relieve it of all of these bad leaves. So this is another one of those kind of plants that all come from a central point. So you can actually go in and actually pull these out. I've got this little section over here. I don't know if you can see it. This little guy over here, he's not doing real hot. Now that's a shame because it's a newer shoot, but it is kind of got some, I'm not going to say rot issues, but it definitely doesn't look healthy. So I'm just going to go in and take that off. I'm going to spray my bleach on there, make sure that's good to go. And again, this is all just pruning to clean, for health, for vigor, to really help it kind of get back on a good footing and not put energy into these old leaves. I'm going to take every single bad leaf off of this guy. See what we got left after that. I don't want any bad ones on here. So pretty easy to do. This might be a great opportunity for me to use my houseplant shears. Probably even bonsai shears, because you saw me kind of struggling to get inside there and get really to the interior of the plant. So this would not be a plant that I would probably go and take and cut the leaf off. Because it's happening in multiple places, all of my leaves would be cut. This guy needs to revive a little bit, so we're going to take it and just prune off all the bad leaves. It's not going to leave us as many good leaves, but that's okay, because I'd rather it be putting all of its energy into producing new leaves rather than putting energy into these. In fact, some of these stalks might only have one leaf coming out of the top when we get done with this. And all of these little prune points down here that you can see, I'm pruning it so that one, I can kind of keep an eye on it. It also is a little bit of a support to it as well. So if I go and I pull all these off that I could do, I get worried about a young plant like this being able to support that. So now we can see all of my leaves look really healthy. I've got one more down here that I missed. Two more. And there you go. So now I've taken off a majority of the plant. Now my rule of thumb is always no more than a third of the plant do I want to prune. However, in a case like this, where all of its energy was going to be putting into those poor leaves, then I would say in this case, it's better to do it. Go ahead, take off all the bad leaves, even if you're left with, 7 to 8 good leaves. It's better to have good, healthy leaves. Let it rejuvenate from there. Now, instead of putting a plant food on this one, I would recommend something that is going to help it kind of revive, which is going to be that Super Thrive. So I'm going to take this, mix it with some water before I put this guy back in the greenhouse to revive. I'm going to give it a little bit of Super Thrive and see if it kind of comes back from this. So Super Thrive, again, is a vitamin supplement. It really helps kind of rejuvenate a plant that's stressed out. Kind of think of it as steroids for humans, right? We take steroids when we have a bad rash, when we've got an issue and we're not quite sure. It kind of helps take that shock off, revives our system, gets it going again. And so this is another great idea, vitamin supplement. It's a really, really good idea to use Super Thrive on plants that you think are stressed out, because if you fertilize it, you're adding another stress to it really. You're forcing it to grow when it's really saying, I'm just trying to figure out a way to survive. I'm struggling. I'm not sure what the reason is, but it's struggling. And so Super Thrive is a way to kind of take that shock off. So great option for this one. So now that we've done some pruning for health, I want to talk about pruning to grow. Because why do we prune? I mean, we think about that, I think, a lot when we talk about outdoor plants. When we talk about trees and shrubs, we think about, I want to make this plant grow. I want to make it get bigger. I want to make it grow faster. And so if we're pruning to make something more vigorous, to grow, to have structure, that's an important thing to do, and it's one of the major reasons to prune. So especially if you got a plant, I mean, that kind of, and a lot of these are going to mesh. So that plant that I just did there, I believe it's a different Bacchia, that is a great option of a way to kind of blur the lines there, where we're pruning for health, but we're also pruning to let it regrow, to let it grow, to add some vigor to it, to get it to kind of really start to push out. You can see this plant here in this image. Look at how gorgeous that is. I mean, it's huge, it's nice and full. That's of course what we want all of our plants to look like. I guarantee that plant has been pruned multiple times to create that vigor and that growth habit. So pruning to grow is a very, very important way to kind of encourage a new growth pattern, or more vigor, or more stems, or more branches. So think of, when we go out and we do pruning of a fruit tree, which is where I'm going to start actually, is we're pruning to kind of create structure, to create a strong habit for that tree to support all of its fruit and all of its different fruit sets, so that it can hold on to all of them. And also pruning for vigor and more blooms and all of those things. So there's many, many different ways to prune and reasons to prune. I mentioned fruit trees because I've got a citrus here. So citrus is a really, really great indoor plant, but it's a great example of when to prune. Now, I grabbed this one. I'm only going to do one prune on it, but you can see here, I grabbed it because it's a great example. I don't know if let me see if I can part some of these leaves here and show you. Right here is where it was pruned. And I don't know when that was pruned, probably last year, not too long ago. You'd be surprised at how fast the citrus is going to regrow. I got a great example here I'm going to show you in a second. But this is where it was pruned last time. And look at this growth. I've got, a foot, almost 18 inches of new growth here. The problem is, if I leave this on here, all plants grow from a terminal bud, right? They're all going to grow from this single bud. A lot of people think of that as the central leader, but every branch has its own terminal bud. And yes, it's going to split off new branches from there. So we're going to get one coming off here. We're going to get one coming off here. But it's going to be slow. It's going to be steady. It's not going to be real fast. And what's inevitably going to happen, we're going to get blooms. So we're going to get all these pretty blooms, which you can see one coming right there, right? So this one's coming. It's on a nice, sturdy, strong branch down here because it's been pruned. If I let this go, then this is going to bloom, and then I'm going to get this fruit set on here, and look at what's going to happen. I'm going to get this huge, this is a lemon, I believe. Yep, Ponderosa, or let's see if it's got a name on it. It doesn't really matter. It's probably a Meyer or a Ponderosa. Yeah, Ponderosa. So Ponderosa, huge lemon, right? So I've got this humongous lemon trying to be supported by this little branch here. So before that even happens, we need to cut it to allow it to really fill out. Because right here, this is nice and sturdy, this is nice and thick, and this is all very nice and thick. So basically that's what I'm going to do. I like to come back probably about halfway of its growth. So we've got, let's see, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 leaves. So that gives us a kind of good judgment. Let's count back 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's right about here. I'm going to always come one lower. So I'm going to go right there, and you can actually see, I can see, let's see if I can turn it so you can see. You can see where that stem actually gets a little bit thicker right there. So right here, it's a little bit thinner, and right here, it's nice and thick. So I'm actually going to go right above that leaf right there, And we're going to prune at an angle. This is important. Oh, before I prune, disinfect my pruners. Good. And then I'm going to prune right here, and I'm going to prune at an angle. Great. Hopefully you can see this. See if I can get it over here so you can see. There we go. All right, so here's where I'm going to prune right. I'm going to prune right here, right at this angle right here. I want to prune about, I don't know, 1/4 of an inch. It doesn't have to be specific, doesn't have to be scientific, doesn't have to be measured. I want to prune about 1/4 of an inch from this leaf node right here. And I want to prune on an angle away from that leaf node, because if water gets on this, if I take it outside for a summer vacation and we get a lot of rain, then this open wound is going away from this leaf node right here. So basically the crotch where the leaf meets the branch. So we're just going to take this, pull this leaf so you can see, and just like that. Super, super easy. So you can see there, that prune, nice and strong branch, and now this is going to be a healthy plant. Give it a little feed, ready to go. Put that one away. I'm going to show you this guy. Let's see if I can get it into the... I grabbed this one because it was definitely one that we pruned the last year. So let's see if I can get it there, support it. And I want to show you this because every point here around this guy has 3 big branches on it. One here, and one here. Let's see if I can turn it just a little bit so you can see. There you go. So you can see these 3 main branches, and all of these branches were kind of weak. And inside here, I can show you 1, 2, 3 prune points. And from that point, that terminal bud that we pruned off, it has branched, and look at the blooms coming on this thing. So each time we pruned, we got 3 to 4 new branches. And then off of that, we pruned it again. I can see another prune point here. So you got 1, 2, 3 more branches. And now this thing is flourishing. And now when it sets its fruit, it'll be able to hold on to those fruits because these branches are nice and sturdy. Otherwise, we wouldn't have got as many fruits, and they would have been way out here on this little spindly branch, and it wouldn't have been able to hold on to them. Now this thing is loaded with blooms. I mean, you can just see all of those white buds, and look at the structure on that plant. And that's what pruning does. And you can see even more growth coming and even more blooms coming. So really, really pretty, great example of a good prune and how it's going to encourage that plant to grow. So pruning to grow is important. Let's see, also pruning to re-bloom is another way of kind of explaining growth. So I know people always ask about orchids. Orchids are very commonly asked about what to do when it's done blooming. So you can see this orchid is completely done. I'm going to take this clip off so you can kind of see the stem. 2 different schools of thought here. Both of them are perfectly fine. I like one because it gives you the option to kind of really do both. The stalk here, you can see all of these areas where the blooms were. So we can see all that kind of zigzag pattern. This is where all the blooms were. Now, if you take this all the way back and you follow it, you're going to see what I call a node. And there's a little thing that's coming out of it. So you can tell the difference between where a bloom was. I don't know if you'll be able to see this on camera. But right there, you can see it's kind of almost got this papery covering. And it's almost kind of starting to kind of brown out. You can kind of see where the bloom was because you can see it's kind of scarred off there in the inside. But this next one down here is still green, it's still pliable. There's definitely nothing has come out of that. So what you can do is actually take and cut at an angle away from that bud, and we can see if maybe this will produce another bloom stalk. It could. Phalaenopsis moth orchids are very commonly done that way, where you might get another set of blooms. Now, typically orchids bloom on temperature. I won't get into all of that, but typically they'll bloom on more of a temperature relation to coming out of a warm season going into a cooler season. That's when they typically bloom. So if we're coming out of a cold season going into a warmer season, you might not. So some people would just say, I don't want to put any energy. I want my leaves to grow. I want this to get bigger. I want 10 bloom spikes next year. I don't want just 1. So a school of thought there is take it all the way back. But if you want to try and get blooms, then you can try this. Now, what you might see is this will start to gray off and start to come back down. If that happens, then you want to come right back down to the base, cut it off, and allow for a new bloom spike to come in a few months. So a great way of kind of pruning to re-bloom. And of course, there's lots and lots of different options of that. Maybe we're growing a miniature rose inside. A lot of plants bloom, obviously, to set a seed. And if it sets the seed, or if it's trying to set the seed after the bloom is done, that's why we deadhead, is to take that energy out of trying to produce the seed into producing new blooms. So that's another form of pruning to grow. Maybe herbs. A lot of us grow herbs on our windowsill. So here's a lavender, really gorgeous. You can see all of this new growth that's come on it. Herbs are a great option to grow indoors on a windowsill, maybe year round, but even sometimes just in the early springtime before we really get warmed up. Now lavender can take it nice and cool, but this one has been grown in a greenhouse, so I don't want to take this outside until I know I'm past my frost date, but it needs to be pruned. So this is a great option here for your scissors again, because this is more of a shaping prune, which is really what I'm going to talk about next. But herbs need to be pruned to grow as well. So now I can use I can use all my cuttings here. I always say with herbs, use them or lose them. So really, really simple way of just kind of pruning that back, because all of these new cuts here, I'm going to get more growth. Pruning to grow, pruning to increase vigor. All right, so then the last one I wanted to show you for this example is vines. So I've got this, another Swiss cheese philodendron, right? This one's healthy, this one looks good. No major issues, but I wanted to show kind of what you can do with vines. So I know I'm not going to show you the top here. I have some vines in my home that I love to kind of see the long, tendrils, the long vines. I love to see them kind of coming down. Tropical vines, almost always want some sort of support system. So like that Swiss cheese philodendron I showed earlier, it needs something to grow on. So it's looking for something to grow on. So in a home where I've got mine on a bookcase and it's just going down, it's searching for a place to climb. Once it finds it, it might explode. But right now it's long, it's drapey. I personally like it. That's what I'm growing it for, so it's all to the eye of the beholder. It's perfectly healthy, it's perfectly fine, but sometimes if you want to keep it nice and full, maybe you want to keep it bushy, it's a great option to prune back vines. So this is a really easy way to clean up a vining plant. Basically, all I'm going to do is take it back. You can see here, this is probably more of a broken branch, but this is a bad way of pruning because it's too far away from this leaf node. Now I've got a new leaf coming out. See that little guy? So it's already producing a new leaf, but this whole stem is going to die back eventually, putting energy into the stem. So I'm going to go ahead and take that and cut that. I've got a new leaf there, so I'm going to leave it. But this one maybe is a little too long. So we're just take that and cut it back a little bit. This guy, same thing. So all I'm doing here is trying to, again, take the terminal bud off. If I take the terminal bud off, it's going to regrow from the inside. I'm going to get a fuller growth pattern. So really, really easy. I'm not going to do this whole plant because I want to move on to the next one. But really easy when it's hanging to kind of go through it and just kind of look for areas that I'm always pruning near a leaf bud if I possibly can. And I'm always pruning at an angle away from that leaf bud. And I'm trying to get it all about in the same area, so I want it all to be right about the same size, and that will allow it to have a nice full shape and push growth back up to the top. So let me show you here. So you can see this side all about the same angle. This side still needs to be kind of shaped up. I've got all of these long kind of, now again, eye of the beholder, you can leave them, you can put them on something, you can train it, you can let them hang all the way to the ground if you want to. But if you want to keep it nice and bushy and full, you can do that as well. So pruning to grow. So this is a great option because when you take that terminal bud off, it's going to explode on the inside. The next thing I want to talk about is pruning to shape. So pruning to shape, I think a lot of us think of for outdoor plants. We think of our shrubs, we think of our trees, Japanese maples always come to my mind, pruning to shape it, to create something. Think of bonsai. Bonsai is a great option. You can see my picture there of a ficus. Ficus are very, very famous for that, needing a little bit of prune because they can get kind of drapey and kind of hangy, and sometimes need a nice kind of shear to kind of form up that nice lollipop shape, if that's what you're going for. So pruning to shape is really more to your liking probably, but sometimes to the plant's liking. Sometimes a plant maybe has gotten misshapen for a different reason. Maybe it's stretching for light. That is very common where you get a plant that's kind of leaning over to one side. Like look at this ficus here in this picture. You can see it's all going to one side, probably because it was grown next to another plant, or it could have been grown too far away from the light and it's reaching for it. So we need to reshape it to get it into its proper shape. So pruning for your aesthetic appeal, what you want it to look like, is perfectly fine, but also pruning because something's happened to that plant and we need to reshape it and get it back to its original form and its original shape. So let me do a little bit of tidying up here. And I'll show you a great example of that. So let's see, what was I gonna do for the shape? Oh yeah, so let me show you this ficus, because I pulled this. This is a, let's see, the Benjamina Samantha, so this variegated ficus. And I wanted to pull this and show you, let me do it over here so you can see that nice backdrop. I wanted to show you like, wow, I could do so many different things with this. Maybe I don't want to do anything with it. I always say when you're pruning, you can't put it back on, right? So think about it. Think about what it would look like if you did prune it. I almost thought, hey, I could take this and limb it up. So I could take all of this growth down here and limb it up. I could take and prune the top back. But I kind of like this droopy habit. I kind of like these long branches. Now, what is going to happen over time is the energy is all up in here. It's going to eventually shade this off down here. I'm going to lose majority of this. So by pruning this back, I might actually be helping the plant. I'm going to think about it because, again, I can't put it back on. One, I've got this plant for sale, and I think it's gorgeous just the way it is. And I want people to have the ability to do what they want to do with it. So you could turn this into a multi-trunk tree. If you do that, a lot of people don't want to do that because they want it full. So if you want it full, you might want to take this canopy back a little bit so that sunlight can reach down here and you've got good proper airflow and good direct light all the way around it. So I wanted to bring this in because I thought about doing it. I decided not to do it because I actually love the look of it right now. And in time, it might need to be done. So probably I'd let this go a year and then I'd see what I'd want to do with it next spring as we enter the spring season. But for today, I'm going to leave it the way it is and let it have a great kind of start to the spring season. And we'll look at it later and see what we might want to do with it later. But I did grab this really cool Schefflera. So this one I think is Trinette, so Arbicola Trinette. So Schefflera is what I think the most common name is for it. It's a variegated Schefflera, but you can see kind of this wild habit. So remember what this looks like, right? It's kind of triangular, it's kind of growing all over the place. It's kind of a little bit kind of unshapely when you look at this guy. Slightly different variety, obviously, but another Schefflera all on its same. So this is, I think, just, let's see if I've got a tag on this one. This one's just Schefflera Arbicola. So this is just your original green Schefflera, right? Really, really basic, but look at how full that is. This is what maybe I want the other plant to look like. Maybe that's what the other plant should look like. So this is a great example of a very healthy plant. You can see new growth coming from it. This doesn't need anything. Maybe a little bit of light touch up here and there, pruning for health and vigor over time, giving a little bit of plant food. But this is what I'm aiming for with my variegated Schefflera. So pruning to shape, right? We might need to prune to shape our plants. So let me get my pruners disinfected because I am going to use my bypass pruners, just regular bypass pruners for this. Now, this is going to be hard to do because it's really got some nice growth habit, but it's all coming from these tips here. So I'd like to be able to cut it back and try and get more growth on the interior. So that's really what I'm going to be going for. Again, this could be caused because maybe it was placed too close to other plants. Now, in saying this before I get started, I will also say you don't have to prune. If you like the shape of it, don't touch it. This to the eye of the beholder, right? So if you love the look of it, if it fits your look, don't touch it. Let it go. Some people might love it. So some people might not agree with what I'm about to do, but I'm trying to get a nice fuller shape, and this is a great example because, again, it's growing from its terminal bud. It's going to grow out. It's going to continue to grow out in these three patterns. I've got some new growth down here. Let me show you that. So you can see right here, I've got this new shoot down here, but it's competing. I mean, it's competing hard against all these other guys. I've got another little shoot over here. So it's trying to do it, but I need to bring these tips back down to allow the growth from the interior so this can fill back out. So this is going to look a little aggressive, and let's see if I can show you me doing it. So here's a nice long shoot right here. Terminal buds growing from there. I've got no new growth down here, so I really need this to break. So I'm going to prune this maybe a little bit harder. Plus these two pads are lower. So I really need to bring this down, and I want to get it right about in here. So this is going to be a little bit more of an aggressive prune. There we go. So took off a big chunk of our plant, right? But it's going to be better off for it. Now, one school of thought is stop there, let that regenerate some growth, and then come and do this one, and then do this one later. But because these have 2 new shoots of growth, I'm coming into the spring season. I'm ready to really get this thing boosted and back into the shape that I want. So I'm gonna go ahead and do it all right now. So there's that one. And this again is looking at the size and making sure they're all staying right about in the same size. This one's really out here. I got a nice pocket of growth right here. You can now see it. Look at that. That's all new growth coming from down on the base of the stem. I want that to kind of take off. I want to take this terminal bud off so I can generate more growth on the inside. And this is overall going to give me a better shape. So there we go. So now look, much tidier, much more shapely already. So it already looks, I think, like a more full compact plant. That's what I'm going for in this case. So now I'm ready to go. I've got more interior light. I've got less energy putting out here. I've got more energy going into filling that back out. It's spring. It's ready to rejuvenate. Great way to shape your plant. So really, really easy. This one, because it's healthy, I've got no issues. I'm gonna go ahead and give it a little plant food and then just keep it watered. Watch it, make sure I'm keeping it in a nice warm spot, keeping it in the right light. Wherever I was growing it, it was growing pretty good. So it's healthy, it's perfectly fine. Put it back in the same spot and then just give it a little feed and continue to be back on your wet dry cycle. Water it when it's dry, let it, and then water it really well. So really, really great way of shaping, and in no time, really probably by the end of, maybe another 3 to 4 months, let's see what happens with its new burst of growth. We might even do a little tip pruning on that to keep on spurring more growth. So light pruning okay throughout the year, major cut like that, we want to do in the spring, late winter to early spring time frame. So pruning to shape is a great option, of course. Now, this last and final thing that I want to tell you is pruning to revive. So this is a little bit more aggressive, and this is going to be hard for me to show because I've got my plant here that I'm going to do. But pruning to revive is something that you might have to do because of numerous different reasons. So neglect, maybe we've had it at our beach house, or maybe I loaned it to a friend to take care of because I was out of the country. Or maybe you just forgot about it. As going to be the case, I'm going to try and explain my story for my plant here because I brought this one from home to show you how to recover it. So neglect is one, old age, of course. Sometimes plants are just old, and then of course poor growing environments. Maybe it's like, ooh, you know what? I've had this plant for years and it just isn't thriving. It just looks like it's struggling. And maybe when you go to put it in a new location, then it needs a revival kind of prune. So that's what I'm going to show you next is how to kind of revive a plant that maybe is struggling a bit. And you're going to see my lovely, let me see if I can get this, my lovely Dracaena. So this is green jewel Dracaena. This one has lived at my house for now 7 years. Yeah, 6 years, sorry, 6 years. So let me get these risers out of the way so you can see what I'm working with here. All right, let me get this back up so I can see everything. All right, so this is my Dracaena. Now Dracaenas are a great example of a different type of plant because you've got these long stalks. That's going to happen a lot with what I call maybe like a caning plant or like a yucca, Dieffenbachias. All of those plants are going to continue to grow up from these long canes. You can see how long these shoots are. And this plant is an older one. I've had it for a long time. And I will be honest, I've neglected it. I neglected it way too much. But it was served its purpose. It has done a great job for me where I grew it. It looked great. Last year what happened is I was going to prune it. It was time for me to kind of revive it. I didn't do it. I stuck it outside for a summer vacation. I kept on saying I need to do it, I need to do it. I neglected it more. The great thing is Dracaenas are super hardcore plants. They're very easy. So if I wanted to know if this plant could really survive a lot of neglect, I just proved it because I stuck it outside in a shady spot. I might have watered it from time to time. I brought it back in. It's literally been sitting in my garage for, I don't know, probably 3 months now to keep it out of the cold weather, but I haven't brought it back in. because I wanted to wait for the right time. So I'm looking for timing, again, is important to do a significant prune like this. So now I'm going to do it. I'm going to show you how to do it here because it's a different kind of style too. And I think a lot of people, when you have a stalk like this, like you think of like a Renegade Schefflera or a Dieffenbachia, a Yucca, any of these, you know, the corn plants, any of those that have the stalk, you get worried about how to prune and when to prune. Best time to prune, of course, we all know that now. It is in the late winter to early spring. But how do I prune this? So I'm going to go through first. I've got some really nice, actually, green growth here at the top. All of these leaves are not very good. I'm going to be pruning it anyways, so I'm going to take all of these off. So this is really easy because you can just kind of pull these off. And let's just get it back to some nice, healthy leaves here. And this looks severe, I know it does, but trust me, this plant is going to be much happier for it. It's finally getting some attention, right? That's what it's saying. So there we go. We're nice and cleaned off. We've got this nice shoot here. Now I'm going to do the same to the other side. The nice thing about this too, because I'm able to limit up, I'm going to have these nice green stalks here to work with, whereas you can kind of see these have hardened off over time. These are going to be nice and green, which is actually going to help me. All right. And I've actually got its pair at home, so I get to do the other one when I get home later today, because I have two of these. So I've taken off all the bad leaves. I got these nice little tuffets of green leaves. Look, they look nice and healthy. They haven't seen any sunlight in a while, but they look great. Now is going to be the hard part, pruning them. Now, the cool thing is wherever I prune these, I'm going to get probably about 1 to 2 new shoots. It's not going to be perfectly straight like this anymore. Not that this is perfectly straight, but you know, this one's really straight. But you're going to get another little puff of growth off the side. Wherever I prune it, just below where I prune it, it's going to grow out. Now, this is one where you actually don't have to prune much on an angle. I probably won't prune on an angle at all. I'll probably keep it fairly flat. That does kind of tend to encourage more growth of an equal growth because I'm looking to really make this a nice full plant again. Where I'm growing this, I don't want it to be stalky and tall. Now, again, to the eye of the beholder. So if you want a kind of tree form Dracaena, that's how they naturally grow. You never have to do anything. But if you want something that's a little bit fuller, this is going to be a great option. Now, what I'm going to do here is I've got to do a little bit of thinking here. I've got these two heights. I'm actually going to take the cuttings and use those to regrow in this same pot. So what I'm going to eventually have is a small, medium, large, extra large. So I got to think about how I'm going to do that. So this is definitely, either one of these could be my extra large, right? Either I'm going to come way down here and prune it off, which I might do, but let me just think through this here. So let's say I want to do, let me pull this up, back on a riser here so you can kind of see where my decision-making process is coming in. This is all that you need to see now. So I've got this tall one here. Now I could do 3 cuts. I could actually take one and I could take this long one here and I could come all the way down. This is where I always say think before you cut because you can't put it back on. I could come pretty low with this one, do a little bit higher there, and I'd actually end up with 5 stalks, which might be kind of cool. But I think for this, I'm gonna only just do 2. I just wanna be smart about it and make sure that I'm good. So I need one that's gonna be the shortest one, and that's gonna be this one. And again, it depends on how far you put it down in the soil. What I will tell you though with these cane plants, don't go too low. If I take this one off way down here, maybe 2 to 3 inches from the ground, you might not get any growth back from that. So do not go too low on these. These are going to regrow from the stalk. So that's what you got to think. So this one I'm going to take, and this one's actually going to be my taller one. So I'm actually going to prune right about there. So now this is my tallest, right? So I'm going to get growth growing from there. This is my stalk that I'm going to plant here in a second. This one I'm going to want to be lower, and then this one will be my next section. So I actually might end up with an extra shoot. Maybe I'll stick that in some soil. So this one is going to be right about, I want it nice and full, so I don't want a big delineation between the two. So we're gonna go right there. All right, I know, that's hard, right? It's hard to do, especially for a plant that I've been growing for many, many years. But now what I also realized is this guy needs to be repotted. You can look inside, it's nothing but a ball of roots. It's been sitting outside in the summer, been neglected, so it's time to repot it.
And this is a great time to do that. So let's see if I can find my pot. I know I grabbed one. Got my soil. So we're definitely going to want to use an all-purpose potting soil, something that's light, that's going to dry out. I don't like using natural and organic potting soils indoors because they have a yucca extract in them that typically hold a lot of moisture. So always get a nice all-purpose potting soil. This is our McDonald potting soil. It's one of the best. So that's what I'm going to definitely use. I just got to find where I put my pot. There it is. So I'm upgrading a little bit. This is a great little size. I love this little size. It's a squat pot, so it's going to be just about the same height of this, so I don't have to put a lot of extra soil around the bottom, but it gives me more soil around the edges. So we're going to take this guy, put this off to the side, and get one of these saucers here so I can try and eliminate the amount of mess I'm going to have. And then we're just going to open up my soil. And I like especially when I'm repotting, I like to have a somewhat moist mixture. So this one's got a good amount of moisture in it. It's been outside for a little while, so it's really, really good. I did bring it in a while ago, so it's given it some time to warm up a little bit because I do like it to have some warmer temperatures to it. It doesn't have to be. It can be cold. It's going to warm up once you bring it inside anyways. But just kind of, my personal preference there. So then I'm going to take this guy out. Now, as you can see, I'm not using my gloves like I could be. Let's get this out of the way. All right. I want to show you what I've got here. I've got this massive root system. It's nothing but a root ball, right? And nothing but some sticks. They look like sticks at least. So I'm going to loosen this up pretty good. I don't want it to I want it to know that it's in some new soil. So we're just going to lightly rough it up here a little bit. I could even try and slightly separate it if I want to, but I think I'm going to be okay just with the spacing that I have here to be able to put my new stalks in it. So now I'm just going to take some soil and fill in around the edges here. I know you can't quite see what I'm doing, can you? Let's see if I can get this up a little bit higher. There we go. Should have grabbed my hand trowel, but I didn't. Now, before I get too far, before I fill it all the way back in, I'm going to take, because I've got an exposed root system here, so I'm going to take my Biotone starter. This is a organic starter fertilizer. Because I'm using this, I don't have to use, it's very light. So I know I said when you're doing major cuts, don't do a hard fertilize because it's going through a shock already. So I'm definitely going to want to use Super Thrive. But what this really has is mycorrhizae and beneficial bacteria. And that's going to really, really help get these roots that I've now disturbed kind of regenerated, and it's going to stay with it the life of the plant. So it forms a symbiotic relationship there. So we'll get that right down into the root system. Okay. Now the nice thing about Dracaenas is they're very easy to root. Again, I don't know a ton about propagation. Some of our houseplant experts here definitely do. So if you've got questions, feel free to ask them. There's lots of different timing and techniques and different things, air layering, sticking in water first, sticking directly in soil, growing in perlite, growing in vermiculite, all of these different options. I don't know all of them. They're pretty easy to research too. But what I do know is Dracaenas are tough, hardcore plants. Trust me, I know, I've got one. And so, in fact, actually, let me pull that back up so that you can see this portion where I'm going to actually put these stalks back in. So now I've got my 2 stalks, and I'm going to put these right back in the same pot and let them just grow. So this one is definitely going to be my lowest one. So when I'm looking at this, how do I want it to grow? I think I want it on this side, I think. So I'm going to kind of do like a 4 step here. So I'm going to put that right down in. You can put this as little as probably an inch or 2 down on the ground. I want it at a certain level, so that's right where I want it. So that looks perfect to me. And then this guy is going to be my next lowest. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 levels. So actually I could take a little bit off this, but I'm gonna just actually put it right down in the soil. Because actually that's perfect. I only went down about 3 inches, so that's perfect. That's a nice, good planting depth. Now, what I forgot to do, and I need to do, and I'll do it when I get off the camera, here is because I know I'm getting a little bit long-winded, is I need to put some rooting powder on there. So what I need to do is pull these back out, dip it in some water. So I don't even have, I do have some water, but basically I'm just gonna dip this in some water. I'm gonna dip it in my rooting hormone, and then I'm gonna stick it down in here. So it's gonna be really, really simple. You don't have to use it. Dracaenas are tough and easy. This is a great way of doing this. I'm actually gonna take my Super Thrive. I've got a spray bottle of Super Thrive. I'm gonna spray this down. I'm gonna spray a bunch of my plants down on this. This cannot hurt. I love Super Thrive. I use it all the time. But now this guy is gonna look amazing in probably about 2 to 3 months. It's gonna look awesome. You're gonna start to see new shoots of growth coming out of here. This is gonna be up here. This is gonna be right here. Got my back, got my front, and it's gonna be a really nice full pot. So really excited about that. Now I get another one that I gotta go home and do, but this is gonna look really, really good. And this is a way to revive a plant that maybe has been struggling over time. It's a great way of kind of being able to kind of bring that plant back to where it needs to be, right? So let's see. That's basically all I've got. So lots and lots of things to digest there. I know I went through a lot of different things. We're pruning for many, many different reasons. There could be a million different reasons to prune our indoor plants, but those are some of the most common ones, right? We're going to prune for the health of the plant, taking yellow leaves off, doing that kind of thing. We're also going to prune to grow. So we need it to be fuller. We want it to, have more vigor. We need, especially like citrus and herbs and any of those edible plants. You want to prune it so that you get more growth. More growth is going to equal more food, but also some of your vining plants. Maybe you don't want it to trail so far. You want to keep it bushy. So pruning it to grow for more vigor, for more fullness. Pruning to shape. So my Chef Lara example there. So pruning to shape is very important. We need to prune to kind of eliminate it from maybe going in a certain direction. Maybe we've grown it too far from a window. It's stretching for light. We need to get it back into shape. Maybe you're pruning it for a shape you like. Think about bonsai. Bonsai, I could do a whole webinar on bonsai, but bonsai, we're pruning it to have an enjoyable shape that we like and that looks like bonsai. But you can also prune for the health of the plant, like the Chef Lara. It's growing a little bit wild. It needs to regrow from the center, so we're taking some of those terminal buds off. We're making it fuller and growing. So, or making it or shaping it to what we like, but also to the plant's health and vigor. And then, of course, lastly, we're pruning to revive. Old, neglected plants like my poor Dracaena over here is going to be so much happier now because we've paid attention to it. We've given a new start, and for many, many plants, that is a very, very good option. Instead of just tossing it, then definitely look at an option of pruning it to bring it back to life. So there's lots and lots of great options there for that. Many, many other reasons to prune, of course, but hopefully that helps with some of the questions that you might have over time. Because I haven't answered questions, I'm gonna get to them right now. So I will take a minute here and answer some of these questions because I know I saw a couple come up and I just couldn't get to it. So first I'll say hello to everybody because I didn't do that when we were going through from the beginning. So Betty, hey, from Midlothian. Kim in Indiana, Adele from Virginia Beach, and she can walk here, so we hope to see you soon, Adele. And then Wendy in the mountains of Virginia, awesome. And then Adele, I answered your question about fertilizing the same day. If you're doing a light pruning, yes, definitely. If we're doing something major like revival, like I did with that Dracaena, then we might do a little bit of a lighter food, like our Biotone starter, but I really love these Super Thrive options. I can't stress enough that if you feel like you're putting your plant through a little bit of stress, Super Thrive is a great option to kind of take that shock off. It's been through a shock, give it some time to rejuvenate before we go and we force it to grow with something like a green leaf or any other kind of liquid food that we might use. So lots and lots of different options there. So Lindsay said, how should I prune a ponytail palm to preserve its shape? Many of the tips on my plant are brown. Yes, and cutting too much can look like a bad haircut. So Lindsay, great question there. Ponytails are famous for getting brown tips. I think a lot of people just learn to live with them, but it is the good news here is ponytail palm is not an actual palm. So palms are one that I didn't mention, and I see another question in there, Norfolk Island pines. So this will answer both of your questions. Norfolk Island pines and palms are two plants that grow from a central point, so you never want to take that off. So if I took a palm and I cut it off at the top, it's not going to regrow from that. Same with a Norfolk Island pine. Now, you can do some light pruning on your Norfolk Island pine. You can do some light pruning on your actual palms. So palm leaves, you know, you're going to get a frond that comes out from the base. It's going to be on the outer edges. It's not going to look as good. You can take that back. But if you cut it off, like I did to my Dracaena here, not going to come back. Same with a Norfolk Island pine. If you top that thing, it's not going to come back. Now, because your ponytail palm is actually not a palm, I think you're going to be okay there. I've never actually done one. What I will tell you is if you want to eliminate that brown tip, then use some treated, or not treated water, but don't use just straight tap water. Tap water is what's always going to cause those brown tips. So Eleanor, try that. Or sorry, I jumped down there. Get your name right. Lindsay, try that. Try taking your water before you water your ponytail palm and let it sit for about 24 hours. And that'll eliminate some of the things that we put in our water, the fluoride and different things like that, because plants can get fluoride poisoning. But you might also want to go get some just regular what do you call it? Not sterile water, but basically just a purified water. Thank you. So going to get like a nice purified water, like a drinking water or something like that, that has a neutral pH and also is going to be pretty safe and not have any of those additives in there, then that might be a good option for your ponytail palm. That will eliminate those brown tips. As far as cutting it back, I think you're going to be okay. I'm not 100% sure what family the ponytails fall into. I don't know if it's a bromeliad or a yucca, but it's not a palm, so that's the good news. I think you'd be fine cutting it back, but what I would do is, Lindsay, if you live in this area, you might bring it in and let us look at it, see if we can kind of help you diagnose specifically what to do with that, because I know ponytails can be a little finicky about certain things. Betty said, will you be doing a webinar on African violets or on violets? I might. So definitely, we're always looking for options. There's a million topics to talk about, so could definitely be something. So stay tuned. We might cover that violets in the future. Denise said, "Hey, it feels like spring today." Sure does. I have a lemon. So Eleanor said, I have a lemon plant. It got flowers and they all fell off, as did some of the leaves. It has a few new buds. What should I do? So Eleanor, the first question would be, did you just get it and you bring it in to your own home? Because citrus are famous for that acclimation period. So a lot of times we buy a citrus plant, it looks gorgeous here in the store. We take it in our home. It goes from a greenhouse, citrus. Think of citrus trees in Florida actually growing outside. They're growing in full sun. And we pull them into a house. Not a problem, not an issue, but typically what's going to go through is a bit of a shock period, a bit of a transitional period where it's going to lose a lot of its leaves, and most likely if it had buds on it, it's going to lose those as well. So whenever you bring it from a greenhouse, especially a plant like a citrus plant, you want to get it near the sunniest possible window, give it the most amount of light that you possibly can, but it's still probably going to happen because light coming through a window is nothing like light coming through a greenhouse. So Eleanor, most likely that's the case. If it wasn't that, then you might bring a picture in. Picture speaks 1,000 words, so you definitely want to bring a picture in, let us look at it. But if you got new growth coming from it, that sounds exactly like an acclimation period where it dropped its leaf, it said, I'm in a new home, I'm not quite sure what to do with it. It says stayed outside. So if it was outside, Eleanor, and we got too cold, that could have caused all of it to drop off. So now if you're bringing it in and out of a garage, let's see, I think there's a couple. I've had it over a year. It stayed outside in the summer. Okay, so it stayed outside in the summer, you brought it back in. So hard to say what maybe caused that. I mean, if you've had it for a year, should be acclimated. Now, a lot of times, even when we bring it from outside to inside, that could cause it. That's still an acclimation period. But typically it won't go through that. Once it's kind of been in its new home for a year, you're usually okay. So could be a different thing there. Now, when plants are blooming, it's putting all of its effort into creating those blooms to reproduce, right? That's why it's fruiting, is to create seeds. So maybe it's low fertility. Maybe it said, I can't support all of this. I gotta regenerate here. So maybe it dropped everything because it didn't have enough plant food. So Eleanor, you might look at feeding it with a citrus tone. We've got lots of different types of citrus fertilizer, from Happy Frog to Espoma, citrus tone. Lots of good options there. You might also bring it in if you've got some leaves still. Hopefully it didn't drop all the leaves, but you might even take a little cutting off, bring some pictures in. You might even bring the plant in. Let us look at it, because maybe there's something else going on there that we can diagnose as well. So I would definitely say, Eleanor, bring it in if you can. We can take a look at it. All right, Betty said, super helpful webinar today. Great. Look forward to the next one. Well, next one we're going to be talking about small plants and creating a small indoor garden. So looking at, fairy gardens, miniature gardens, succulents, different types of things like that, little ferns. I love those things. Maybe a terrarium. I'll plant up some stuff. We'll have fun with that one as we get geared up for our spring showcase coming up this spring. So I hope you all enjoyed this. I hope you come back and see us. We're going to be doing lots of these. They're always free and they're always informational, I hope. So I hope you all get a lot out of this. And if there's no more questions, then I will see everybody next time. Have a great day, everybody.